please. Yeah, sure. We have a Constitution. It's a very important document, and we live by it. She has no votes, and I'm very happy to run against her. I'm not complaining from that standpoint. And I hate to be defending him, but he did not want to leave. He wanted to see if he could win. They said, you're not going to win after the debate. They said, you're not going to win. You can't win. You're out. And at first they said it nicely, and he wasn't leaving. And then you know it better than anybody. Wait a minute. So when you think about it, they said at first they were going to go out to another vote. They were going to go through a primary system, a quick primary system, which it would have to be. And then it all disappeared, and they just picked a person that was the first out. She was the first loser, okay? So we call her the first loser. She was the first loser when during the primary system. During the Democrat primary system, she was the first one to quit, and she quit. She had no votes, no support, and she was a bad debater, by the way, very bad debater. And that's not the thing I'm looking forward to, but she was a bad debater. She did obviously a bad job. She never made it to Iowa. Then for some reason, and I know he regrets it, you do too, he picked her, and she turned on him too. She was working with the people that wanted him out. But the fact that you can get no votes, lose in the primary system, in other words, you had 14 or 15 people, she was the first one out, and that you can then be picked to run for president, it seems to me actually unconstitutional. Perhaps it's not. Please.
Mr. Philbin says that the House is not ready to present its case. Of course, that's not something you heard from any of the managers. We are ready. The House calls John Bolton. The House calls John Bolton. The House calls Mick Mulvaney. Let's get this trial started, shall we? We are ready to present our case. We are ready to call our witnesses. The question is, will you let us? That is the question before us. Now, Mr. Philbin says, well, if I showed up in court and said I wasn't ready, the judge would throw me out of the court. Of course, we're not saying we're not ready. But you know what happened if Mr. Philbin went into a court and the judge said, I've made a deal with the defendant. I'm not going to let the prosecutor call any witnesses. I'm not going to let the prosecutor present any documents. You know who'd get thrown out of the court? The judge. The judge would be taken out in handcuffs.
The question is addressed to counsel for the President. As a matter of law, does it matter if there was a quid pro quo? Is it true that quid pro quos are often used in foreign policy?
Chief Justice, thank you very much for your question. Yesterday, I had the privilege of attending the rolling out of a peace plan by the President of the United States regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I offered you a hypothetical the other day. What if a Democratic president were to be elected and Congress were to authorize much money to either Israel or the Palestinians, and the Democratic president were to say to Israel, no, I'm going to withhold this money unless you stop all settlement growth, or to the Palestinians, I will withhold the money Congress authorized to you unless you stop paying terrorists. And the president said, quid pro quo. If you don't do it, you don't get the money. If you do it, you get the money. There's no one in this chamber that would regard that as in any way unlawful. The only thing that would make a quid pro quo unlawful is if the quo were in some way illegal. Now, we talked about motive. There are three possible motives that a political figure can have. One, a motive in the public interest, and the Israel argument would be in the public interest. The second is in his own political interest, and the third, which hasn't been mentioned, would be in his own financial interest, his own pure financial interest, just putting money in the bank. I want to focus on the second one for just one moment. Every public official that I know believes that his election is in the public interest. And mostly you're right. Your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment. I quoted President Lincoln. When President Lincoln told General Sherman to let the troops go to Indiana so that they can vote for the Republican Party. Let's assume the president was running at that point, and it was in his electoral interest to have these soldiers put at risk the lives of many, many other soldiers who would be left without their company. Would that be an unlawful quid pro quo? No, because the president, A, believed it was in the national interest, but B, he believed that his own election was essential to victory in the Civil War. Every president believes that. That's why it's so dangerous to try to psychoanalyze a president, to try to get into the intricacies of the human mind. Everybody has mixed motives. And for there to be a constitutional impeachment based on mixed motives would permit almost any president to be impeached. How many presidents have made foreign policy decisions after checking with their political advisors and their pollsters?